The Sarasota Manatee MPO Technical Advisory Committee. Today is Monday, January 13, and it's 10:05. Believe we do not have a quorum. Can you, somebody, someone up over there? Probably from just like. Could have been a ghost.
Can we cover items that don't require?
Yes. So, Rachel, can you confirm a quorum later, and then we'll go through? Okay. Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right, item 3, public comment. We have one public comment. Public comments are limited to 2 minutes. John Sidor?
Sider.
Sider. Sorry about that.
So I'm John Sider. I'm from Sanctuary Cove community in Palmetto, Florida. Just like a couple minutes to talk to you about the Bradenton Palmetto Connector Alternative Corridor Project 4448431. Be concise and respect your time. I'm going to read my statements. Try to wing it. So I'm here to request the MPO to be an advocate in terminating phase 2, the PD&E study of the Bradenton Palmetto Connector Alternative Corridor. The process of down selecting the bridge options used inaccurate, outdated, and inadequate data with minimal public awareness and input from our perspective of reviewing a lot of the published documentation. Project phase 1 planning used an outdated decision-making matrix with inaccurate or missing details for number 1, home count impact like our community, historical structures of our area, recreational land, as well as a software model using 2040 traffic predictions that should be carefully re-examined by those that have oversight of that process. Point 3 that I'd like to make is based on the FDOT methodology memo dated August 7th of 2024, FDOT was negligent in providing adequate notice and awareness of option B modified to residents like us in Sanctuary Cove, Canal Road, Bradenton's 9th Street, the Manatee School of Performing Arts, and businesses located on Canal. We've done a sweep of the neighborhoods. Nobody knows option B has been down selected from 10 to 3, top 3 contenders. A fact, the FDOT project team didn't even know our 255 residents of Sanctuary Cove existed, and that an additional 300 units are in our community for ongoing construction. So one of our residents went to Bartow in October of 24 to make introductions and invite that project team to see our community. They came out to visit us, didn't know we were there, right? We're right along 16th Avenue where this bridge is going to impact. The down select from 10 to 3 was already completed by that time of their meeting and visit with us. At the time of the town hall at the Manatee Fairgrounds, that was done a couple of weeks later in November. Point 4, the project study zone should be changed to encompass a greater area to identify the best corridor of alternatives, like they did taking the 2019 zone and bumping it up to a greater span in 2024. All of Parish, Florida needs to be included considering the tremendous growth of the township, as well as the Manatee and Sarasota counties is identified in today's Bradenton, Sarasota Herald news article.
I want to point out that your 2 minutes is over. If you can just
So my
summarize.
conclusion, real short, we believe the data used for phase 1 planning was outdated, inaccurate, incomplete for the down selection decision-making process to go to this next phase 2. For the 3 remaining options, I'm asking, do not let the project momentum get in the way of critical thinking of a path forward. Start over. There's more options than the original 10 to meet the project goals. Not trying to make a beef about just option B. I think the overall process is in need of a good technical, critical thinking overview. So appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment? Okay. We have a quorum. Okay. Quorum has been confirmed. Gonna move on to the approval of minutes for November 4th, 2024. Do I have a motion? Megan? Motion made by Megan Louie, second?
Second.
Second by Clark Davis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right, motion carries. Item 5, action items, 5A, Transportation Improvement Program, TIP amendments. Pam?
Okay. We had 5 TIP amendments, and of the 5, 4 of them had to do with the transit departments in both Sarasota and Manatee. The other one was for a new project was added as for the design phase for the assist project on 15th Street to 87th Street. The others were as part of applications that were submitted to the transit department for funding. We have Meals on Wheels received funding. We have a 5310 operating for Manatee. We have a 5310 capital for Sarasota. And then we have a service development grant for Route 77 expansion in Sarasota.
Right, any questions? Do I have a motion to approve the Transportation Improvement Program amendments?
Move the committee recommend board approval of the amendments.
Okay, do I have a second? Second. Right, second by Nick. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Motion passes. Next up, item 5B, 2021 to 2025 safety target setting. Nina?
Good morning, everyone. So at the start of every year, the MPO board considers adoption of proposed safety targets recommended by the Technical Advisory Committee and the Citizens Advisory Committee. Safety performance targets are an annual mandate required by FHWA of all MPOs in the nation. This will be the 8th set of safety targets that we will be adopting, hopefully in January as board meeting. They are due to the state by February 27th. The safety targets that we are proposing again this year are safety targets of 0 for each of the 5 performance measures, which are based on 5-year averages of crash data. That is the number of fatalities, number of serious injuries, and then the number of non-motorized fatalities and serious injuries, and then also the fatality rate and the serious injury rate. This proposed safety targets are the 3rd set of targets of 0 that we are proposing to the board. Historically, up until 2022, the board had opted to set specific safety targets every year. And then in 2023, the board moved to adopting targets of 0, which is consistent with the state safety targets and the nationwide Vision Zero network or initiative. So these are the safety targets that we are proposing again this year. So just taking a quick look at the safety data, what we have here on the screen is daily vehicle miles traveled over the last few years from the, just let me get my bearings here, from the 2016 to 2020 to the 2020 to 2024 time period, we saw an increase of about 6.4 daily vehicle miles traveled and an increase of about 5% in total annual crashes. When we look at the 5-year rolling averages for fatalities and serious injuries, we saw about an increase of 6.4% over that same time period. And in 2020 to 2024, that average is about 125 people killed in fatal crashes. And looking at serious injuries, those rates have been reducing pretty consistently over the last few years. So in that 5-year time period from 2016 to 2020 to 2020, 2024, we saw about a reduction in 39% of serious injuries, and the rates follow suit to that. over that 5-year average period, we've seen an increase in non-motorized fatalities of about 26.5%. When we look at the 2024 data, that 5-year average, it is staying fairly consistent to the previous year. So really what we saw is an increase and now a plateauing in fatalities of non-motorized users. Serious injuries have gone down in the last year, but that is still an unacceptable number. So for a total of 164 non-motorized fatalities. When we look at the pedestrian and bicycle data, fatalities involving a bicyclist or a pedestrian accounts for about 30% of all fatalities and serious injuries or fatalities in the 2-county area. This is marginally higher than what we presented at the same time last year. So for this reason, we are again proposing safety targets of 0 to prioritize safety of all of our road users. Historically, the MPO board has also voted to support the transit safety targets. These are the safety targets proposed by Breeze this year. They are in draft format until they are adopted by the board. And we do not yet have the safety targets for MCAT, but Chris, if you want to speak to that, please feel free. Otherwise, the motion can be amended pending the TAC's direction. And so,
Any questions?
You mentioned that it's consistent with nationwide. What are the values that the other states use for their safety targets?
I can't speak to other states, I'm not 100% sure, but FDOT sets safety targets of 0 every year, and they have historically done so. I believe probably most other states also set targets of 0, but I don't have those off the top of my head.
I flipped through a dozen or more and didn't find any with 0.
Okay.
And so if we're saying we're consistent nationwide, I think it'd be good to get some more detail on that.
So yeah, let me correct that. So the federal government itself does not set safety targets, but they do support the Vision 0 initiative. And then each state is required to also set their own safety targets, and the state of Florida sets targets of 0.
So if our target is 0, where do we define what we're expecting?
We take a look at the crash trends. By setting targets of 0, we want to see decreasing trends year after year after year. And that is what we are seeing with the serious injuries and the serious injury rate, but those fatality rates are going up. The board had decided to move away from setting specific targets due to the issue of setting a specific number of that we are comfortable of people that will be involved in fatalities and serious injuries. And then secondly, the crash data is very fluid. And so if we set a safety target, the crash data the next year might change depending on what the targets was set on against the data.
So if you flip back to the pedestrians. One more. Yeah, so that increased 26.5%. So I guess if we're expecting these numbers, then finding a way to say that this is what we're expecting, and if we're not, what does the roadmap look like for not saying that? Or is there a number that we're comfortable with, and if not, what are we doing if we're not comfortable?
That is a discussion for the board, I believe, and for the larger committee as well. But when we see increasing numbers, we take a look at our safety action plans, and we want to make sure that we're programming safety projects. Dave, did you say something?
I would just also add just the general trend of setting acceptable numbers of people that we're willing to kill seriously injure on roadways. That's the statement made in setting Vision 0. I can name at least 20 of the 27 MPOs in the state of Florida that targets of 0. And the principle behind that is we're fully aware that we're not meeting those targets, and a lot of that has to do with growth. If you go back to the VMT map, we're also adding, in the last 5 years, our VMTs increased by 6% as well. So we're trying to work on a decreasing effort, right? Our VMT is increasing, we just make sure it's a proportional rate downwards. So you might see increasing rates, right, across the board, but if we're working on as Nina said, our high injury network is a way that we're starting to do that. So enacting on a high injury network, we've got, what is it, 20 segments on our high injury network? Like 60% of our fatal and serious injuries are occurring in the network. That's what we're trying to address to draw that number downwards. So by setting, historically, when I first started, we were setting from 2017 on, and now we're picking numbers arbitrarily, right, and saying, okay, we killed 125 people.
Data driven, like they were doing percentage decreases.
They were percentage decreases, saying, so we would say we want to decrease it 5% a year, every year. Are we really realistically going to achieve that as well, given our growth? Unlikely, right? We're seeing them increase across the board in the state as well. So by setting that number and saying we killed 125 this year, when we kill 120 next year, we're not changing the narrative at all. In fact, it's actually saying that we're actually just still okay if we kill 5 less this year. So I think it's more of a perception, right, of setting 0 across the board. That's been the state's position since these came out in 2017, is that no life is unacceptable being lost on our state highway and roadway system. How do we go about doing that? Instead of focusing on the exact number, how do we go about doing that through our safety action plan? I know city and the county are working on a safety action plan, using those as a means to get to a lower number and then recording them. By no means are we just gonna, that's why I needed reports on the data. We're not just letting the data go by the wayside and saying 0. That was always our argument with the state. That's why we set our own numbers for 6 or 7 years. Is because we didn't want to just say, oh, it's 0, we're not going to look into it. No, it's with 0, aspirationally and hopeful that we can drive those down, while also simultaneously understanding why those injuries and accidents are happening. So it's a 2-part.
Yeah, and like there's definitely been a lot of work with the, Vision Zero document that was put together. And maybe it's something that could tie into with the Vision Zero advisory group. And I saw there's one for the calendar, and I think with the number of 0, possibly there could be more.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the goal. And we had a leadership group in the past. And if there's, drive, and I know there's a number of agencies that are working on their own action plans, just like we did, prior to the grant process coming out. Yes, there'll be opportunities for us to coordinate on that front and say, yeah, what are you all doing to make sure our networks align? I know I'm sitting on, the efforts that the county and the city are doing with their action plan. So making sure that what we're proposing is in line with that, making sure our high injury networks line up. Luckily, the process is fairly prescribed, at least from federal highways perspective, through the discretionary grant and what they want to see in those action plans. So making sure our process is aligned with yours is certainly important. We'll continue to do that.
Anything else? Right, do I have a motion? Come on, people, my last one is TAC chairs. Yes.
Move approval. Second.
Thank you. Motion by Clark, seconded by Raji. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Moving on to action item 5C, 2024 top 10 accomplishments. Grace?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Siaski, the Public Involvement Coordinator at the MPO. And I'm going to give an overview of the MPO's top 10 accomplishments from 2024. The full list was attached to your agenda packet, so I'm just going to use some headings. All right, so we had several priorities funded in the work program. One to note is the Bradenton Palmetto Connector PPE. We adopted 5 planning studies and kicked off 2 more studies at the end of 2024. We also kicked off the 2050 LRTP and drafted the 2050 vision, which is creating a balanced future. This included 2 public surveys, 2 public workshops, and 2 outreach events, which leads me to the next accomplishment, public engagement. We launched 3 surveys, hosted and participated in several public workshops and events of our own, and also with our regional partners. And the MPO's 2024 public participation plan was also adopted. Next is safety. FHWA invited the MPO to pilot their organizational safety culture self-assessment. So we co-hosted a 2-day workshop here at the office. We also hosted our Destination Zero Roadway Safety Forum in May of 2024 with participation from FHWA, FDOT District 1 Safety Office, and the Florida Department of Health. We have seen a lot of local and regional activity around the Florida Gulf Coast Trail in 2024. The MPO worked with local partners to add 6 new trail priorities. As for resiliency, the board adopted phase 2 of the resiliency and vulnerability assessment, which integrated feedback from our local partners from the recent hurricanes. MPO staff presented at the APA Florida Planning Conference. TRB and our director, Dave Hutchinson, presented at multiple AASHTO meetings in 2024. Finally, there were 38 committee meetings and 5 board meetings in 2024. So those are the highlights, top 10 accomplishments. Thank you all. Here's Anina's gonna do the 2025 strategic priorities.
So this is just a look at what we are prioritizing moving forward in 2025. Our activities are generally organized around 4 categories: planning, implementation, administration, and engagement. So in terms of planning, we've got our mandates, those safety performance targets that we set every year. The project priorities that we'll take a look at later today, monitoring the tentative work program, the TIP, and then of course this year adopting the 2050 long range transportation plan, which you'll hear a little bit more about later. We've already have 3 new studies kicked off, so we'll be looking at wrapping up the Barrier Island implementation plan, transportation investment analysis, and then also the Ed Smith mobility study. And then we're looking at kicking off 3 new studies, the watershed and transportation asset analysis, a regional transit feasibility study, and a regional freight and passenger rail analysis. So busy in the planning work in the upcoming year. In terms of implementation, we want to continue focusing on implementing our priorities as defined in the current long range plan. Those are the bike ped trails priorities and the active transportation plan, the congestion management and TISMO priorities and the congestion management process, the resiliency projects, and of course our safety projects. We want to continue monitoring the pilot project on US 41 for transit signal priority. This is an important implementation of a study that was completed a couple of years ago. So I want to make sure we continue seeing that forward momentum to support transit in the region. We want to continue implementing our safety action plan, focusing on education this year, looking at how we can support our enforcement partners, and then taking a closer look at our crash data. So we're working very closely with a company called Cidian to develop more granular safety data so we can provide more detailed crash data to you all. And then with the adoption of the LRTP, we'll also be updating our project prioritization process over the next year. In terms of administration, a great deal of these are our annual activities. This year, we are also doing our FHWA federal certification, which I believe happens every 4 years. And then we're also issuing a request for proposals for general planning consultants. In terms of engagement, we are really focusing on the 2050 long range transportation plan this year, leading up to the adoption. We'll have the public comment period open in July, August, ahead of adoption in September or October. So we're implementing that outreach strategy and doing ongoing public involvement in regards to LRTP. That's right. Thank you.
Any questions, comments? I do have questions. The watershed and transportation asset analysis and then the regional transit feasibility study, what does that entail?
So those both are concepts of things that we've seen, I guess, out in experience in the last few years, specifically in the watershed front, kind of building on our resiliency efforts and looking at how our stormwater facilities and how our watersheds impact our transportation facilities. So primarily not just looking at our assets and the state's assets, but also looking at development and growth. in the region and making sure that we better understand. So working with our partners at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, as well as our estuary programs, have shown interest in helping map and overlay, either using LiDAR or flyover technology, looking at where those watersheds drain into, and better understanding the impacts of the investments that we're making for our transportation assets going forward. So not just, our smaller facilities, but obviously the larger, more interstate related facilities and how we can better plan those. From the regional transit aspect, we've been asked by a multitude of different entities about what we're doing in terms of passenger rail. So the MPOAC, David and I have been involved in a freight and rail committee, MPOAC levels and understanding connections from Orlando, potentially to Tampa. There's been a proposal put in, look at Southwest Florida Rail from Lee County up to Tampa. So we've been a part of that effort and looking into how we do that. So we want to assist it on the ground in our own area. And also, alternative modes of transit, so water taxis and the forefront, number of conversations, as well as how our two transit agencies can interact better if there's opportunities to do that and coordinate. So both of those have been concepts that have been brought up by a number of different agencies, and we want to help support those. Those goals have not been formalized. We'll certainly be open to concepts and ideas brought forward by the TAC prior to adoption of those or passing of those projects. So looking forward to your guys' input on this.
Thank you. Anything else? Do I have a motion?
Good staff recommendation.
Motion made by Clark, second. Second made by Megan. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to item 6, presentations, 6A, FDOT report.
Not necessarily a presentation, but there are a few key dates coming up. Right now, we're open with applications for TA that closes on March 31st. The congestion management and trip closes on June 30th. Safe routes to school, I'm not sure, all these, of course, need to go through the MPO process so that they are well aware and they have it plugged into their system too, so they can help monitor through this. But Safe Routes to School closes on the 31st of this month, in January. The Protect Grant closes on February 24th. The SIGP closes also on March 31st. The Sun Trail has closed already. It closed on December 19th, so it's complete for this past year. As they were going through the different items for the top 10 things that were accomplished this year for the MPO, those items will most likely be included in the joint certification, which we are in the process of starting now with the MPO as the joint certification process. We will get them their draft by the 15th of February. Because we have to put the package together, have our meetings and review to be back up to Tallahassee at the central office before June 1st. This is also the season for earmarks. We are starting to receive a bunch of those coming down from the legislature. So they're best if they go through the process of going through the MPO rather than skipping line and going directly there. So if there are projects that need to be completed, all projects really should be centered through the MPO, follow the process. And that's pretty much it right now for the FDOT report.
Questions, Clark?
I missed one at the beginning. Can you please repeat the ones that close on June 30?
The congestion management and the trip, which will also go through the MPO.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you, Pam.
Next up, item 6B, MPO report, draft 2025 project priorities. Nina, Ryan?
So included in your agenda packets are a draft list of the 2025 project priorities. This list has been updated with all the applications that you all submitted in December. So what we are asking at this point is for you to do a close review of this draft list to make sure that we have all the accurate information on that list. And if applications have not yet been submitted, this is the final call to do so. As Pam mentioned, for a great deal of these larger grant programs or funding programs, they do have to be prioritized by the MPO. So you want to see those projects on these lists as well. Aside from just doing a close review, you might be hearing from staff over the next few years or weeks if we have follow-up questions on some of these projects and some of these applications. As far as I know, we have received updated applications from everything that we were anticipating. But we may have a few follow-up questions here and there, so keep an eye out for an email from staff. The last thing that needs to be submitted also is the jurisdiction priorities. So there is a jurisdiction priorities template also attached to the agenda, the cover sheet. This needs to go to your jurisdictions and be approved. So any application that has been submitted must be affirmed and approved by your jurisdiction. So we ask that those come to the MPO by February 3rd. Then lastly, we'll bring an updated draft list to this committee in March to be presented for approval. And then we'll take it to the board in March and then submit all the updated applications to the DOT along with this priority list. So with that, we'll take any questions that you have or any comments on the draft.
Gonna go with Clark first and then.
I think it's simple to, so I missed it in the packet, the jurisdiction priorities list is just our local priority table that we have awarded. Okay. I am out of step this year, so you'll present the draft to the board, the NPO board on the 27th, and my board won't see it until the 28th. I mean, we'll still get them in on time, but, and we'll brief our commissioners so that they're aware of that. They'll see some stuff at an NPO level before they see it at a board level, but I think everything.
So the draft, this draft is going to the MPO board in January?
Just as a
Preview.
Okay, because you don't meet in February. Is that right? Okay. David?
Just a comment, on this list, you'll see the green category funded, and I'm asking my staff to modify the title of that, because just because it's received some funding for some phase, Bradenton Palmetto Connector is a good example. The study is funded. No construction is funded, no design, no right of way, and it may never get funded, actually. So this, we have some projects in the city of Sarasota that have were funded through design, but no right of way, no construction. Their priorities maybe for the state of Florida, and they are focusing on their own priorities. So that used to mean, okay, it's in the works, it's gonna happen eventually. I don't think it means that anymore. And I see Pam shaking her head, that's not the way, we can no longer count on continuing funding just because it's even funded through design. So we'll want to make sure that our elected officials understand that just because it's received some funding doesn't mean it's going to get built. A couple of roundabouts, I think, were in that category, and there was an assumption that they were going to be, they'd be built eventually by DOT, and that hasn't happened, and we don't know that we don't expect that to be automatic. And then the other item is there is always a chance that some new priority will be added during the year. Recently, we had a call from the parent company of, I think it's Racetrack. They want to build charging stations at some of their gas stations along both the I-75 and the I-95 corridors throughout the state. And we suggested that that scale of a project would need to have the support from FDOT in order to get a protect federal grant to move forward. And I think they want to do implementation actually, and get funding to actually supplement their installation of these charging facilities. And we referred them to central office, notified the district, as of last week, after 3 weeks, they haven't heard back. So we don't know where that's at. But it's kind of one of those things that if it does move forward, we would want to bring to our board supporting that grant. And you know, other things are happening that may or may not be priorities on this list that are consistent with our long range plan that we would want to perhaps add later on. We've done that with some Sun Trail projects recently. So anyway, just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Next item is 62, resiliency update.
Everyone, good morning, happy new year, and I am so chilly here. I have you all that too, but so most of these items have been discussed already, but then I'll give you a quick update of in terms of, since we have consolidated TAC into the TAC minutes, this is like a standing TAC item, so it will be open to any updates from the jurisdiction as well. And so in 2024, in November, the board has adopted resiliency and vulnerability assessment phase 2. So the resiliency and vulnerable assessment was in 2 phases. Phase 1 was kind of categorizing the regional transportation network into 3 tiers based on their vulnerability and criticality. And the phase 2 kind of focused on refining tier 1. And then they've identified 18 priority segments, which are cost feasible for MPO funds. And so these are the list of 18 priority projects, which I think you've all seen already. And we have the Barrier Island implementation plan. So for this, even for this study, resiliency will be a key focus throughout the study. And the team has kind of produced a resiliency memo, and Nathan from the resiliency team is here and he'll give you more update about the study. And like discussed, we are planning to conduct a watershed and transportation asset analysis in fiscal year 24 and 25, 25 and 26. So this study kind of builds on the previous resiliency efforts, but through the lens of watershed, so which will give us a better understanding of inland flooding, runoff, etc. So sometime this year we will kick off the study. And predict grant again. So there are 4 types of grants: planning, resiliency, improvement, community resilience, and evacuation route, and at-risk coastal infrastructure. So I suggest all of you to apply for the grants, and if you have any questions or concerns, we can always collaborate with the MPO staff and we can support you through the process. And it is open until Monday, February 24, 2025. And open for any resiliency item discussions.
Any questions? Clark?
So Manatee County has been in our environmental division is doing an ongoing I guess resiliency related study. I think it ties into what you're talking about here related to vulnerability and sensitivity. We are at a stage right now where we're doing that exact part of that analysis. It's looking at a hypothetical scenario where you get 1 foot of inundation over a number of different facility types in transportation structure, you know, aviation, port, rail, and surface streets, bridges, but also things like county parks and public facilities and things like that. Long story short is we should get through that analysis and some of the reporting and have a final report by April, and hopefully that ties into what you're doing. We share it with you. Of course, being a county, we're focused on things at say a more granular level that maybe you are, but I think there'll be some stuff in it that you can back out and use with your more regional approach here at the MPO. So offer that as, we got an ongoing thing we can share with you. Right.
David?
Yeah, that's exactly the type of collaboration that we're hoping will, be occurring as this topic, remains on the front burner going forward. It's gonna be a big part of reauthorization. We see a lot of states like Texas and Florida are saying you should put this money into the formula distribution program so that we get a more automatic fair share than just having it be part of a discretionary grant program. And so, we'll see where that discussion goes as Congress and the administration move forward over the next year. Because the previous authorization will be done in, fiscal year 2026. So resilience, safety, and project delivery, project readiness are gonna be three big themes, I think, that we are gonna talk about. And we put a lot of money gambling with insurance that we're not gonna be affected by some of these potential catastrophic events. And now those insurance rates, guess what? The insurance companies figured out that they're gambling, that we probably are, so they're raising their rates. Maybe instead of just paying them, we should invest in some infrastructure to have better flood protection, water saving for fire prevention or firefighting, those sorts of things. So, investing in infrastructure for resilience is gonna be a big topic, and how do we do it? And I think it's gonna end up coming into that insurance reform discussion as well, because it's like we only have so much money. And you can either put it into infrastructure or you can, send it somewhere else. So just a thought, so that as you all are working with your intergovernmental staffs and your lobbyists in Washington DC, that you're thinking formula funding versus discretionary grants. That's better for Florida. Thank you.
So I have a question, in the backup material, there was a map included. Says final prioritized roadway segments. There's a highlight on US 41 Mound Street in the city of Sarasota. That goes southbound to 301. But that is not highlighted in the city of Sarasota highest priority cost feasible plan project table. Is that a mistake on the map, or is it I'm missing something in the table?
Yeah, it might be.
Okay, yeah.
Table is probably accurate. I would caution you not.
Yeah, it's because it's a little squiggly line to US
Yeah,
301,
yeah.
and Main and Ringling roundabouts are at that location too, so that's why I'm asking.
Okay, yeah, we'll look at it.
Anything else? And Nick?
So similar to what Manatee County's doing, we're doing the same thing. We have a DEP grant to do citywide mapping, to do stormwater modeling, and we already have a consultant on board, and we're hoping to get it done by the end of the year. I don't know if that timeline's gonna fit in, but it's part 2 of the vulnerability study that we have within the city. So once we get that report, we can certainly provide that on to the MPO.
Yeah, Nick, and that'll help with our upcoming study. So yeah, anything we can get, our April is good, that certainly works with our timeline. Anything that doesn't make, into the RTP will be brought up in kind of why I wanted to continue that resiliency on the watershed front, and what we're looking at, generally understanding transportation assets that'll be helpful, even if it's later this year, we're kicking off that study later this year. So we'll certainly be able to incorporate that into that effort as well. So even if it's not captured in the RTP by then, we'll be able to continue to move forward.
Anything else? Next, we have 6B, 3 Barrier Island Implementation Plan. Nathan?
Thank you. So we're working on the Barrier Island congestion study. As Bertini said, a lot of what we're doing is trying to address some of the high congestion points of the island. It's looking from essentially Anna Maria all the way down to the southern county line of Sarasota County. Included with the congestion, we're looking at resiliency studies, things that can be applicable to that area. Previous traffic studies and then some case studies from similar communities around the nation and especially Florida. We've developed a congestion dashboard. At some point, if you'll share that with the group. Essentially what it's doing is taking the data that we found, it's applying a value attached to it. We'll go over the metrics in just a minute. And then it's graphing in 3D what you see, just so you can kind of at a glance pick out what's going on. You can't see it in the screenshot underneath the map. It actually goes through the different scores of each of the congestion metrics and identifies the locations based off of that. So the way we did it, we segmented the roadways into quarter-mile segments, looked at origin and destination pairs using Python scripting, and then Google Directions API was queried using the segments. We essentially used the API to predict the traffic, looking at on-season and off-season. One of the reasons we did that is obviously we can't, historical data recently is affected by COVID, affected by hurricanes, things like that. So we want to take something that's projected out for like a normal traffic condition. We pulled the data off in 1 hour increments and then ranked them based on our congestion metrics. I'm going to go over these kind of broadly. If anybody wants to get a little deeper, we can, but it's not the most interesting, right? Or the most fun. So planning time index, PTI, essentially how much extra time travelers should plan to ensure on-time arrival, even in the worst 5% of traffic times. The 80th percentile TTI, it looks at moderately congested conditions, helping to understand regular delays, not just that extreme 5% case. Semi-standard deviation is looking at travel times relative to free flow time. It's essentially, it measures the variations when the travel time is above the average free flow travel time. And then congestion frequency, which is the amount of time spent congested in a day as a ratio of that day. So essentially 1 would be it's congested the entire day, right? Out of that, 14 locations kind of jumped out. I'm not gonna read through these because we're gonna go through them individually. But the first one, and I've got, these are ranked in terms of what came out and kind of our thoughts of why, and what if we plan on moving forward. If you have any comments, feel free to speak out, just do it slowly because I'm writing by myself and I'm not great at taking notes that quickly.
What story this is?
So this is Canal Road and Ocean Boulevard. Where? I don't. Whose jurisdiction is it? Yeah, okay, thank you, CSP. Alright, so this is more of a downtown area, right? It's a lot of restaurants, some parking, on-street parking. This came out as the worst area. And the reason why I think is the congestion metrics we're using don't do well when you get to all-way stops. When you get to the people sitting in their cars looking for parking, that's why it shows up, because it essentially comes up as a like fake congestion. Because sitting in your car looking in a parking spot or at a 4-way stop, since everyone's stopping, is essentially modeling stop and go conditions in a segment. So this one is one, unless anybody has any comments on it, we're proposing not doing additional analysis in this location. Cortez Road and State Road 789. This one I don't think any of us would argue has a lot of congestion. For this particular study, we are not going into this further. The reasoning is this is being analyzed under FDOT project 430204-2, the PE&E. So the amount of traffic analysis they're getting into there is honestly going to be a little bit more in depth than we're doing in this study. You're going to get a better answer. And this is from my understanding, this is the current proposed configuration of the intersection. State Road 64 from East Bay Street to Gulf Drive, I believe these two locations, so the congestion goes all the way from Gulf Drive to East Bay, both intersections as well. I believe this is also in a TD&E for the State Road 64 bridge. We're going to verify that it is still included. If it is, we are also proposing not analyzing this additionally, just because that analysis in the TD&E is going to be a lot more in depth than what we are doing for this analysis. US 41 D Ridge, this is a good candidate. Persistent conditions on weekends and for some weekdays. This is one that we are proposing taking to the next step. Midnight Pass and Beach Road is also one that popped out. This is another one that we are planning on taking further. Minnesota Key section, this is one I kind of wanted to bring to the TAC. So this is popping up as very high congestion. We can't figure out why. So we're gonna get into it further if we need to, but ultimately, it's a residential section. There is a boat ramp a little bit further, but the boat ramp itself and the roadway by the boat ramp is not congested. So one of the things I did want to bring to the TAC is asking if any of you in that area have any knowledge of why that would be congested, or if it's just an outlier in the data.
Sarasota County.
Sarasota County, I don't know if you're here today, but I can certainly, I think she might be online, so I can certainly follow on that one, yeah.
When is the data, when was it collected? Did I missed that.
We're looking at basically this part of January in 2025 for on season, and then May, the early part of May, looking at off season.
You have May 2025 data.
Yeah, it's projected off of Google API. So one of the challenges when we were collecting data was based off of. So the last few years, we've had a few issues both with hurricanes and with COVID and stuff like that. So what we wanted to do, I understand the accuracy desire in this area to making sure we capture on season, off season, make sure we're getting it. So one of the things we proposed, Google API data looks at some of the non-outlier years and allows you to get a little bit of a projection of saying if we're not having an event, what's going to happen in this near-term projection.
But that's basically the same as using a model projection, and so, I mean, look at your data before you start asking the locals what's wrong with it. I mean, any comparison to some real data might reveal an issue with what the Google API is coming up with. I mean, you're asking it to tell us what's gonna happen in January and May of this year based on a handful of historical things, and it's just, it may be making a bad assumption.
Have we finished the presentation? I'm sorry, I asked a question in the middle of it, but,
That's fine,
Right.
okay. Go ahead, Dave.
So you're basically saying that section, which is a low speed, residential, it's not necessarily congested other than it's very slow moving and it's a narrow road.
It doesn't.
And you're not planning on doing much more with that.
Yes, unless we can find a reason to, we're identifying that as an element.
One thing that might be contributing to that, normally when I ride my bike, I'm wearing a director workflows, not in spandex and high vis, but it could be worth looking at Strava and seeing if that's a high bicycle route and if that might be contributing to speeds otherwise. I think that's a good.
I think Paula can, she said it was the question, was it just, why is it listed on these?
There's good reason to think that Minnesota Beach Road would be really congested.
That's what we're saying.
That's the question for Paula.
Paula, do you hear that?
The mics are right here in front of you.
Hello, I didn't hear the question. What was it that you?
Paula, can you hear me?
Wait, it's so
Oh,
quiet.
It's very low.
Can we turn that up?
She's
Oh,
speaking.
sorry, great. Okay.
Can you repeat the question that you had for me?
Yes, so we're finding. We don't find a reason, so this is kind of like a last ditch, let's make sure that we're not missing something. The original projected data based off the Google API is showing up on Minnesota Key just north of the boat ramp. In the residential area, it's showing up as a highly congested area. By the boat ramp is not, it doesn't really lead to anything other than like single family residential. So we were checking if there was anything that we are missing when we're looking at our data and our projections that you may know of that would cause that area to be projected, or if it is an outlier or an artifact in the data.
You changed the.
I would say that that is accurate what you're saying, that there is not a lot, there's only some single family homes to the north. I'm not sure why it would show up as congested because there's no outlet further north. I would have to look into it more, but I don't know why it would show up as being congested.
Okay. Moving on, the Blackburn Point Bridge also showed up. Once again, I think this is coming up to where you're letting traffic stop and stage for the next vehicle. It's showing up as artificial congestion because of the stopped vehicles. State Road 72 and US 41. Had a lot of fond memories with Paula on this one. But as you may be aware, Siesta Promenade is coming in on the northwest corner. Once again, with this one, we can analyze it. I will say that this has been extensively analyzed, being a part of that analysis. The biggest issue, honestly, is that in terms of what could be done is that median opening at Avenue A, and if there was willing to close it to extend the turn lanes. In the past, that was not part of, that was part of the conversation. It was decided not to go in that direction. And that would be the only thing that's really left after the analysis to be able to do, aside from right-of-way purchasing and turning that into an alternative intersection. Ben Franklin Drive and Tyler Drive, we think a lot of this has to do with some of the parking, looking for parking. But anyways, it's a lot of the weekends is having a lot of the issues, congestion occurring 43% of the time. This is one of the ones that we are going to continue looking at. St. Armand Circle area, every leg showed up. Since City of Sarasota is working on this right now, I believe you have study or design right now. That was not led.
Nothing.
What happened to the project?
It
No,
died
no
off.
funding.
No funding.
No.
Okay, it's not one of the green ones on the list. Right. So
Well,
we
can you
may-
reevaluate that?
We may reevaluate it.
Funding to do it.
Yeah. So that one may be reevaluated. Originally, we were putting it aside because there was a project there. But it looks like we will be reevaluating that. The Gulf Stream Roundabout, that has been recently studied. Both to put it in, and I believe there's a study that has happened after the fact, is operating exceeding expectations from what the study said. We are not proposing investigating that further. Gulf Drive at Holmes Boulevard and Marina Drive. We are gonna look into that. I have a suspicion this is from Q backup from Gulf and 64. But we are going to look into it to verify. Midnight Pass and Stickney Point. We'll take into that a little bit further. 776 Minnesota Beach Road is also a good candidate. And any questions? Nick?
So there's one more project, between Second and Fourth, south of the Cortez Bridge. There's a traffic circle, I think, over there, so take a look at that as well.
Say that again?
There's a traffic circle, there's
Bridge Street.
yeah, Bridge Street, so I think that location's pretty intense.
Keep Gulf Drive and City Bridge to be something. I think the slowdown at Bridge Street is all tied to the Cortez and 789.
I think potential operational issues, I could be wrong, but on the traffic circle side of it too as well.
It's a small traffic circle.
Yeah.
Seems like it works a lot better than four-way stops would.
Sure, but a lot of congestion at that location.
What was the intersection?
It's
789
south,
and 789
Yeah.
Gulf Bridge Street. Breaking Beach.
that's correct.
One thing to note too, there is congestion occurring in other places, like on the segments. We did not look at a lot of the segments unless there was intersection divide. The reasoning because if the intersections aren't stopping people, the segments are going to flow. And then there's a lot of cases too, where we've dealt with this, we're not widening on the island. So when you get to the segments, unless you want to widen, the biggest places of operational gains are gonna be your intersections.
I see that Paula has her hand raised virtually.
Yes, I do. You talked about State Road 72 and 41 intersection and the median opening just to the west. Is that showing high number of crashes?
We'd have to reevaluate it. We haven't looked at it since we did the analysis that I thought with Stickney Point or with Siesta Promenade.
Right.
At that time, there were some, but I guess it would be it's a question of what you
Okay.
use are.
Yeah, I would be interested in seeing what those crashes are. I know that the county's currently got an SS4A and grant going on that will evaluate our, crashes and everything. But if there's a safety issue there, then we would have to look at doing something with that intersection, whether it's closing it, directionalizing or something. I don't know if anything will get better.
And Paula too, I don't know what the county has available to them, but if you remember too, we talked about from Avenue A cutting over to Avenue BC with new signal. I think there's an alleyway going there. If there was some way to make that connection, to push people to the signal instead of the immediate opening.
Yeah, that's something, because there's no real connection or access. And years ago, there was could have been a connection over at Gulfgate Drive.
The bank was.
Yeah, but that has kind of gotten taken away from us. I don't know if there's a willingness from the county to pursue trying to get that reestablished as a way for better circulation in that area, but really would depend on what's going on as far as the safety issue at that intersection.
Got it. That'd be easy, cool.
Right.
So for the two big intersections on Anna Maria Island, I agree with the approach for Cortez, that project's farther along even than your slide says. I think they'll be in letting this time a year from now, so it should be under construction during 2026. But I'm not as convinced by this that the Anna Maria Bridge extends back through the Gulf intersection. Do you know, Saji? I mean, I think that would stay on there as kind of being wide.
The version I saw did not, and even that got bumped out to 29.
It's out there, they because of control conditions, they prioritized Cortez over Anna Maria, so Anna Maria being a couple years later.
So I agree with your comment.
So it's our home speech and Manatee County request to keep the State Road 64 Manatee Avenue at 789 intersection around the curve into the city parts of Gulf Drive in the evaluation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Clark. Got another one. What about Fruitville between 41 and 301? That's another pretty intense area doing peak hour traffic.
Not interested.
What? What about?
Getting line.
Not here, but.
I mean, the 301 and Fruitville intersection is a nightmare.
So what I want to say is,
We went to 40.
because an intersection doesn't show up does not mean it's not congested,
I got
right?
it. Okay.
Because if we're. So, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, right? Dave, some of you may have remembered there was like a $1.2 million study years ago that looked at everything like what you're talking about. One of the things that Ryan was asking with this is find the worst with something that's tangible that we can go through with the thing. So when we do the screening, it's not saying there is not congestion, right? So like this morning, so Anna Maria used to be the beach that we went to. It'd take about an hour and a half through the back roads to get there. I left 2.5 hours early today and I got here with like 5 minutes to spare. So there is congestion. It is part of what we're doing. What we are trying to do is based on the data and the metrics, the specific metrics, choose enough that we have something tangible to work towards the worst and start knocking.
What about issues with operational issues, right? So I mean, it's not necessarily increasing capacity, but it's to address like the intersections maybe needs to be enhanced in the design and that aspects of it to help deal with congestion.
That's where we're specifically looking at the intersections because we're looking for the operational improvements.
Yeah, and mainly we stuck to the first major roadway off of there, so big one. 301 would be another jump, but I think there's plenty of conversations to have about what we do between 101 between 41 and 301. We're certainly going to continue, and I think there's other ways that we can not just do this study. That I think 301 with Fruitville can be captured in other NPO efforts as well, not just in there. So yeah, we can talk about that.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Nathan.
Thank you.
Next, 6B4, transportation investment analysis, right?
Yeah, it's just real brief gathering. But So I just wanted to give you all a heads up and an idea of what we're gonna be working on in terms of this investment analysis we're looking at. We just got the work back today, so we'll be kicking that off here shortly. The idea is to take a look historically and forward when we're coming up here on the LRTP adoption on how we've invested NPO funds, whether that be SU, TA, carbon reduction, as well as state funds, those that we have some control over, some thought and assistance with the state, whether it's SIS facilities, district dedicated revenue, SA, which are federally funded district funds, and how those investments were made. So what types of projects were the primary receivers of these types of funds? Where did these funds go? How long is taking projects to get from start to completion? So a broad swath and look at our implementation and funding process, and taking that in hand with our LRTP adoption. So this project is going to kick off here in January and run through October. Similar timeline as the adoption of LRTP. So ideally, by the middle of the summer, we have some good ideas of how our money's been spent over the last 10 years or so, both on our discretionary side, but as well as projects that we've had some influence with the state, so that we can better prepare our investment strategy and the cost feasible for the next LRTP cycle. So really, this will be a time for you all to take a look at. Hopefully, we've got lots of data. Our team over at Kittelson's already rolled a vast majority of the historic work program, TIP, and revenue sourcing and information that we need to do this analysis. I'm sure we'll be in touch with Pam and DOT to get further information on things that we don't have a full picture on, so that we can provide a better and more comprehensive look for the upcoming cost feasible. So that if there were off base or we weren't funding things from start to finish, or if we were funding things inappropriately, that we can get those adjusted, so we can have a more efficient process here in the next several years. So I'll happily take any questions. I don't have a lot this time. Like I said, it just kicked off, but we'll certainly be in touch over the next several meetings regarding anything that we might need from you all, or any other backup information to kind of complete the picture. So that's all I've got right now.
Is the analysis so you're talking about that you're gonna look at historical data for funded projects that maybe if they went through the whole process. If they didn't go through the whole process, are you gonna identify like pitfalls and what happened? Okay.
Yes, yeah, no, not only things that were completed from start to finish, but also how much money we were actually allocated versus how much was actually spent. So we have an idea, we got some revenue forecasts, and one of the big ones was when you compare the 2045, the idea of this came out, we compare our 2045 revenue or 2050 revenue, there were some drastic differences, right? And some major overestimations in the state programs. So we want to see how much money we actually did get versus actually allocated. And then if there were a number of projects that were going to cause some of those issues, what were they and why did they happen? What can we do to kind of better set ourselves up for the next LRTP, so that we can address them more head on. So that's the idea. Yeah.
With District 1, one of the things that happens too, like last year, we were inundated with a lot of the earmarks. The earmarks had to come out of our regular budget. So in order to pay for those that we're told we have to by the state, we had to cut other areas. So it took funding off of maybe a project that was laid out to have maybe SU funds, but we don't have that much SU funds now to give because they had to go to the earmark. So when people bypass the process, it takes money from those projects that were regularly scheduled.
Yeah, or in some situations where the state is asked to backfill projects, right? So the state $10 million was taken out of appropriation. The state now has to backfill that with transportation trust fund money. And then we are then asked to fill using SU funds on state road facilities. So it's a chain reaction. It's those kinds of events and things happen, or project delays across the board, right? So with costs going up, projects then didn't have enough money to be completed, and that just kind of creates that same domino effect of funding challenges that we'll address. So this will look at that holistically, and then tell us where our downfalls were, how much money we got. Hopefully, we see, I think we've got a pretty good idea of where, our dedicated and formula funds went, but where did the state's funds that we could help influence go? And then hopefully set ourselves up and we can give you guys better information on where you need to apply for projects, where we need, where we've got gaps in our program. So that's the idea.
Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Item 6E5, 2050 long range transportation plan. It's gonna be a sequence.
Wrap it all together, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So the purpose of this item is just to give the committee a quick update of where we are on the LRTP update. The last you heard from us was in November, I believe, with a presentation on the draft 2050 vision, which we tentatively called Creating a Balanced Future. This was based on feedback from the committee, the board, and a great deal of public involvement. So that's been drafted, and we have also drafted the background research report. We are currently working on updating the goals and objectives for the 2050 plan, and that will lead into the prioritization update. We are actively seeking further public input on this phase. And so we have completed a workshop and an outreach event in December, and have a survey currently live until the end of the month. So there's still some opportunity for folks to give feedback on goals and objectives, what sorts of project types we would like to see funded, and how to strategize moving forward. We are also working on updating the LRTP chapters, the special focus on updating the safety chapter. A portion of that update is to identify specific segments and intersections, and emphasizing non-motorized safety on the high injury network, which was identified by the MPO last year. So we have just gotten started on that. We are also wrapping up the revenue forecast, so we'll be ready to present that to you coming up. And then ultimately development of the cost feasible plan. So as we're getting into the cost feasible plan development, we will be requesting rather a great deal of feedback from the committee and our elected officials on the board in a workshop and an outreach event, which we'll host likely in April. We'll get that date out to you as soon as we have a venue solidified. We'll also be releasing a third survey with specific feedback on the cost feasible plan. So this is kind of where we are now. This is the information on the survey that is currently live. We will close it on January 31st, and you can access the survey through the LRTP website, transform-tomorrow.com. So when we're looking at the cost feasible plan development, we're looking at wrapping up the revenue forecast here soon. We'll also be reaching out to each of the jurisdictions to schedule a town tours so that we can have close discussion around local priorities and the projects that we need to look into incorporating into the cost feasible plan. And then we'll have that stakeholder workshop in April. We'll get a draft of the cost feasible plan in May, as well as a draft of the unfunded needs. The projects that we're looking at integrating to the cost feasible is we're looking at the 2045 cost feasible and those unfunded needs, as well as projects that were identified in completed MPO studies, as well as FDOT studies, and then looking at those local priorities that you all have identified. And then one component of the cost feasible plan development is the model. So last week, Varshini sent out the results of alternative 2. Those came out to the committee on January 8th. And so we are actively looking for feedback from the committee on what sorts of projects do we need to prioritize and put into the next alternative run. And so that needs to go back to the district by February 3rd. So this will be the third of 6 total runs. I'll hand it over to Ryan and Varshini if you have any more to add on the model.
No, I was just gonna add, it's one piece as well as just a singular piece of the decision-making process. It's, I would say, limited in some capacity to fully predict and model congestion in 2050. Really, it looks at capacity type improvements. That's where you'll see the most impact. Things like alternative modes and intersection improvements and operations are not really effectively measured in this model. So take that with, and it's also based off of our 2050 SE data. So areas where we'll see failure occurring is where we're anticipating the most growth. It seems like logical, but in Northern Manatee County, for example, building 40,000 homes projected by 2050, there's very little that we can do, I think, in terms of capacity improvements to the network that we're not going to predict congestion in the future. So take that with the grain of salt when you look at that. We can certainly look, there's some proposed, I know Varshini and I were trying to tighten up, they missed a few of the things that we had. You'll see on those maps, there's The pink segments are things that were either previously identified in the 2045, or we've made some minor suggestions to change that for the second model run. So we're looking for any feedback you might have. They did miss a handful, obviously. Range Palmetto connector was one that was not highlighted. Areas like that, we had identified 3 other major intersections and capacity improvements that we wanted them to take a look at. So prior to, what was it, February 3rd, if you have any feedback on the model, specifically, really looking at if we missed any major capacity tile improvements. Unfortunately, I don't think the model's quite adept enough yet at predicting, improvements to transit headways or increasing trail numbers and things like that aren't overly predictive in this model. So take that into account when you're making those recommendations. So thank you.
Any questions? Bart?
I've tried to find where I missed it, but I'm accustomed to having done this many times before. At some point, seeing an existing plus committed road network, so that your roadway network as it exists today, plus everything that's fully funded for the next 5 years in state and local programs, as sort of your baseline network to test against your 2050 socioeconomic data. I can find base SE data, future SE data, socioeconomic forecast, vision and goals, objectives. I can't find this network request in there at all. And it's wrong right now. I won't mince words. And if you're going to expect the 40,000 homes in North County, you also get the roads that are committed to build within their developments. It's not going to solve all the world's problems, but it won't be quite as bad as you're projecting. And so I can make this a drop everything crisis to take a look at it, but I badly need to see an E+C network symbolized by lane call, so I can review it and provide some feedback, hopefully before you get into all 3, because you're trying to solve some problems that may not exist or may not be as severe as projected, and I would very much like to help you with that. It goes to the credibility of the model. I know it's focused on highway mode. It doesn't solve all the world's ills, but it won't play well if it's showing problems that downplays problems that do exist or shows problems that don't exist. It just won't resonate. And so we very much need to help you get that straightened out.
So we can work with Yeah, we can get with traffic data. If they do have it, they do have an E+C committed roadways. We can certainly help get that from traffic data in District 1. District 1's running the model with traffic data, so we can certainly get you that E+C. So we can take any feedback you'd have on the existing network and whatever's up there committed. So hopefully we're not dumping everything on 64, because that's an example of a roadway that is obviously showing failure health.
So who's the best person for me to reach out to request this? Or
We can set it up. We'll reach out through traffic data, District 1 to get that to you.
if we need to do it in a committee setting, or I need to be here with staff, I can come to the office and help whatever it takes and to do it as quickly as necessary. And a couple of meetings maybe here and there that are conflicts, but I think I can make space for you.
Great. We'll set that up.
All right.
The main thing they model is what's in the tip. So a lot of the roads that you're talking about aren't gonna show up in the tip, so that's why they're not reflected in the model, the D+C. But I think what you're also saying is there's gonna be capacity off the state highway system that will, that's not reflected. So good points. I don't know, Varshini, is there a way to distribute the E+C so that everybody can check their areas and look for any significant projects that have been built or are expected in the next year or two that are not reflected in the E+C? Thanks.
So I think send an email that has the online dashboard to the network, all of you after everything, and then if you have any feedback or comments, just reply to that email.
Okay, thank you, Varshini. Paula has her hand raised.
Yes, I was just gonna also request that it be submitted to the entire TAC.
Yeah. Yeah, they will send it out to the TAC as a whole as a link.
Thank you.
And Elisa?
Is there anything in here since 2050 could be kind of the time for maintenance of the roadways that are getting built? Is there anything that helps encapsulate that cost of maintaining those roadways that are getting built?
Not with this model, not in terms of maintenance. No, it's simply, it's looking at And simply, how do we reassign new, new homes,
It's looking
new trips to the roadway?
cost feasible capital cost. It doesn't look at long-term.
Yeah.
Official costs.
Any other questions? Thank you, Nina, Brian. All right, next item. Election of 2025 chair and vice chair. I would like to say it has been great being the chair. I have officially fulfilled every capacity a TAC member can have, because I started as a TAC MPO staff person and made it all the way to chair. So it's been great, like pulling teeth sometimes, but it's a good committee and I appreciate everyone's time and support throughout the year. Is that going, okay, fine. So in terms of chair elections, it has to be from Manatee County, since I represented Sarasota County, City of Sarasota. So, Town of Lombo Key, who is not here.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay. You can sit at the table, by the way.
I came in really late, didn't want to disturb, I'm also pregnant and wobbling, so didn't want to disturb it.
No, it's okay. So, the Town of Lombo Key falls in both counties, so they can be elected as Manatee, as the chair this year. Since they represent Manatee and Sarasota. Do I have nominations?
But first, thanks for serving this year, Ally. You're a great chair for us. Second, I'd like to nominate, if she's willing to take it, Jamie Sindewolf. Come from vice chair to chair this year.
Love that nomination. I don't know if I can second it. Can I second her? I'll second that. I mean, do you accept?
Sure, yeah.
All right. Clark made a motion to vote, Jamie Shindenwolf as TAC chair. I second it. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, next up, the vice chair has to be from Sarasota County. Oh, well, Sarasota in general as a area. Do I have any nominations for Sarasota?
I'll nominate Megan if she's willing to serve.
Hey, Megan accepting, I take that.
Sure.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
All right, so Megan Louie, vice chair, has been motioned by Clark Davis and seconded by Jamie Daniels. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right, awesome. Carries. Megan Louie is now the vice chair. I can go, fine. Great, next up, we have the ones around the table. Or here. Nothing more to report.
Nothing from Bradenton.
Congratulations.
Okay.
Nothing?
No.
Nothing. Congratulations, Megan. And then can I have your name?
Yes, Alyssa Grove. I'm with Manatee County, the new planner on staff.
Okay.
I have just one introduction I'd like to make. Lindsay Sherwood with, she is with City of Holmes Beach. She helps me with all sorts of things. Lots of folks have probably heard from her already. I just wanted her to put some names with faces, and for those of you who talked to her, be able to put her face with her name as well. You'll see her a little bit more frequently. Our roles aren't changing. She is my right-hand project supervisor. And so just wanted her to be able to kind of see a little bit of the sausage making.
Nothing there, thank you.
Lombo Key.
We may have a change in membership since I'll be on maternity leave, but we will communicate that to the MPO staff. I'm sure they'll be making their introduction whenever they're here, but that's it for Lombo.
All right, thank you. Then City of Sarasota, and I have Sarasota. Okay, so I have a couple of announcements. The art installation on 14th and US 41 has been installed. It's poly, it's about a 20-foot piece of art. It's beautiful. So if you're riding down 41, I encourage you to go through the 14th Street roundabout and check it out. It's the first piece that's been installed on a Florida Department of Transportation roadway, so that's really exciting. It's taken years to get this far, so we did it. The second announcement that I have is the city of Sarasota is partnering with the school board and Booker High School on a Safe Routes to School project. So the process to submit an application is pretty involved. There's more details. So we first formed a task force with the school principal, as well as the school safety officer, school board representative, and city officials. And we performed a walking audit and looked at some of the existing conditions and looked at if there were any hazardous walking environment for students. And we're hosting our public meeting on January 15th. It's at 5:30 at the Booker High School Performing Arts Center. We encourage anyone to join us and get involved and learn more about the project. We're actually going to be talking about some of the proposed improvements that we'll be submitting. And like Pam said, the application is due January 31st, and our hope is we will be submitting before then. But January 31st is deadline. So with that, like I said, we encourage anyone who's available and wants to see some of the work that goes into Safe Routes to School application, come on down on the 15th. And then I'll piggyback on some of the city of Sarasota accomplishments. Thursday, we received a letter of award from the RACE grant for 10th Street and Boulevard of the Arts. City of Sarasota was awarded $12 million to do the 10th Street and Boulevard of the Arts complete streets, which is also in the MPO project priorities, by the way. Oh, no, you don't get it. So that is it for City of Sarasota. Paula, you had something?
Yes, yes, speaking, what we talked about the appropriations, I was informed by my boss that the county will be submitting 4 state appropriations applications. And let's see, our Sarasota County will be approving or adopting our NPO project priorities on January 28th. And I'm glad you brought up about the Booker High School Safe Routes to School, because I was curious, is any of those improvements going to be on the county facilities or being proposed on the county facilities?
No.
Okay. And we will have some comments on the project priorities. We're going to be removing some of our requests for trip funding. And that's all I have.
Hey, Paula. Anybody else? Yep. All right, so. Somebody from the audience want to say something?
Yeah, if I may, just real quick, I'm wearing my volunteer hat with the Greenways and Trails Foundation today. Thank you. So the Greenways and Trails Foundation has a 2-day conference in Venice, Florida, February 5th and 6th. Some of you may have already heard about this. I know Dave Hutchinson is on the agenda and your staff is participating, I believe. But it's a 2-day summit. It's all about greenways and trails. Our partners are DOT and DEP, as well as the Wildlife Corridor Organization, Conservation Florida, everything from planning, design, safety, trail advocacy. Kind of like day 1 is really trail and greenway focused, both Sun Trail and regular greenways. And then day 2 is kind of focused on the Florida Wildlife Corridor for the first time, because Senate Bill 106, that Sun Trail legislation, kind of connected the 2 programs, the Wildlife Corridor, as well as Greenways and Trails. So it's a great session. We have 20 sessions, 45 speakers. If you go to Florida Greenways and Trails .org, so it's fgtf.org. We have the program and we have registration information and everything you need. So thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Nothing else? Once and twice. Right, this meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting is March 10th at 10 a.m. Thank you.
You wanna, you gavel or try it?
Adjourned. Then I'll throw it back.